Welcome everyone from YouTube. My name is Sloth, this is Godforge, and thanks a lot for stopping by. In today's video, I just want to give you a real quick heads up on a guaranteed eternal epic hero, and if the hero is worth it and how to get him. The hero that I'm talking about is Gilgamesh, and you get this hero guaranteed once you clear the campaign, once you finish the final stage of the final chapter in the campaign. Now, I didn't know this, and I'm still quite sure that it is not shown in the campaign interface or whatever it's called, that you get him guaranteed once you clear this stage. So I think that a lot of people of you don't know this. So now let's talk about the hero, about his kit, and then I will give you in the second part of the video some small tips and tricks that made it way easier for me to finish the campaign. Because it is not too hard, honestly. I only used one 5-star hero to get until the final chapter, the final stage of the final chapter. And then I think with good RNG I could have actually cleared it with this one 5-star hero. But then in the end I went for 2 5-star heroes, which made it just way easier. But first let's talk about Gilgamesh real quick, about his kit and some nice niche techniques that you can use with him. So first, his abilities. He is not too groundbreaking, and I would not say that Gilgamesh is S tier or top tier, but he's also definitely not a bad hero. He's just not mediocre as well, I think a little bit better than mediocre. I'd say he's like a decent hero, you know. However, let's talk about his kit. On his A1, nothing special, he attacks one enemy, which scales with HP and attack, while the HP scaling is fine. An additional 20% chance for strong hits if the target's divinity is above 50%. Now, strong hits are very nice. The damage is just so much better on strong hits, so in general I think this A1 is definitely fine. Also, by the way, he has an HP aura for all battles, or an HP leader bonus for all battles, which once again I think is very fine, especially considering that he is an HP nuker. Second, his core ability. Here now he attacks all enemies, and for an AoE, I think the scaling is actually quite decent. Once again, not insane or something, but it is definitely decent. And also, interesting, he increases the damage inflicted by 1% for each 1% of missing health on this HP. So there definitely are some ways to abuse this, to make him deal way more damage. Just in general, I think it is fine, it is a good AoE scaling, fine AoE scaling, and once again, I don't want to repeat myself too often, but he scales with HP. The scaling is definitely decent. It could be better, it could be worse, but in general, the idea of having a nuker who scales with HP is quite fine. It's a good idea to build those heroes because they are just, compared to attack nukers, most likely dealing a little bit less damage, but it's so much harder to kill them. It's easier to keep them alive. So this is why I would not underestimate Gilgamesh. And then his ultimate. Pretty much exactly the same scaling as he has on his core skill. Once again an AoE, and if the target's divinity is above 50%, which is quite often the case, it increases the damage by 50%. So this can hit quite hard actually. It is once again not insane, not groundbreaking, but definitely a very decent skill. But yeah, as you can see, it's all built around damage. And then his passive. When an ally or an enemy activates their ultimate ability, and this is something I think is very strong, it increases this hero's divinity by 10%. And since there are something between 8 and 10 heroes on the field, this passive is very valuable. It just helps him to activate his ultimate so much more. So the passive actually I think is very good. Not only decent, I think this is a very good passive. But now let's talk about something else that I think it's absolutely worth to mention when it comes to Gilgamesh. Because if we get to the index, there are actually 3 heroes that have some partner skills in combination with Gilgamesh. First, it is Ishtar. And Ishtar is a very cool hero. I would love to have an Ishtar. She's an AoE nuker. She has an AoE attack on her basic skill, also on her core skill. And then on her ultimate she has a single target nuke. And not only a nuke, but also she places Retaliate on herself, which is insane I think, because Retaliate on herself for 3 turns in combination with an AoE basic attack is very cool. However, she pairs very well with Gilgamesh because of her passive. Yes, every single time that she is attacked, she has a 50% chance to redirect the damage to a random ally. But if Gilgamesh is one of those allies, she will always redirect the damage to Gilgamesh. Like, actually it's the whole damage, it's not only 50% of the damage. So yeah, I think this is very decent, very interesting. You should, if you have Ishtar, you should definitely at least give this a try. This also pairs very well with Gilgamesh because his damage increases if he has less HP. So I think this is a very cool combination, those two heroes. Then we also have Ninsun, who also pairs quite well with Gilgamesh. Nothing groundbreaking, but she has a very cool core skill where she removes one random debuff from all allies and then places a mend. So a mend is just on heal over time. But then if Gilgamesh is the ally that is targeted, I mean she targets all allies, but if Gilgamesh is one of those allies, she removes instead 2 debuffs and places 2 mans. This is it, that's all. But it is definitely cool, especially once again considering that he gets quite a lot of damage if you pair him with Ishtar. A pair of those 3 heroes I think would be very cool, would be a very cool team I think. And then finally we have Enkidu. He once again pairs with Gilgamesh and I think he has the coolest interaction with Gilgamesh. It is his A1. He attacks one enemy, it scales with his HP and attack, that is a 2-hitter, and then each hit will heal for 30% of the damage inflicted. It's nice, it's not groundbreaking, but it's nice. However, if Gilgamesh is an ally, he will always join the attack, and this is something I think is very cool actually. So if you have a strong build Gilgamesh, Enkidu can really help your team to smack. So a team out of those 4 heroes, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, Ishtar and Ninsun, definitely a very fun team. However, I would not now recommend you to invest all your resources in Enkidu, especially early on since we are low on resources. On the other hand, it's a beta and if you want to, you could definitely go for it. I want to try this as well quite soon, but I just got Gilgamesh and first I want to clear some other stages, but then I will start to test around with the different teams and I will definitely build Enkidu. So stay tuned for future content if you want to see if it is worth it or not. So now this is Gilgamesh, this was his kit. Now just a really quick recommendation how to build him. I think it's probably quite obvious, but there are only 2 stats that you really need for him, not 2 stats. But first, of course, you want to prioritize HP, because she is also kind of a tank for your team. And then I would also focus, as always, on enough speed, something like 150 early on is okay, and apart from that, crit rate. I would focus more on crit rate than crit damage, because 200 crit damage is very good, but it helps not too much if you only have like 10 or 15% crit rate. So this is why I would focus on early on crit rate. But crit rate definitely should work quite well with him, considering that he has the built-in chances, increased strong hit chances. But yeah, that's it. This is Gilgamesh. Now let me give you just some real quick tips for the campaign that helped me to clear the campaign. And first, once again, Skadi. Skadi is so good for the campaign, especially for the waves, but also actually when it comes to the boss, to the final stage and the final chapter, because the boss comes with 4 adds, 4 heroes, 4 enemy heroes, and controlling those heroes with freeze is very useful. However, if you don't have Skadi, it's not that big of an issue. You can just go here on the down, on this menu in the very down, click on select effects, and then you can choose disables. And there are some very strong disable effects that will help you quite a lot. And you can just sort for those effects. So for example here, I can look for freeze. She's the only hero that I have that can freeze. But disable, or what is it called? I'm sorry, I'm still not 100% familiar with all those debuff names. But this debuff here is also quite useful because it will make the enemy also lose a turn. And this is all we need. We want the enemies to lose their turns, so they make nothing. So this is why Stun, of course, as well is extremely strong. So if you have someone who can stun, this is very, very helpful. And even sleeps can be helpful. But when it comes to sleeps in comparison to the other control effects, the problem is that if you hit those heroes, they wake up. However, if you manual the stages for the first time, then the sleep is actually very, very useful as well, because then you can just time your skills properly and avoid waking up the enemies. So one hero that I want to talk about in particular real quick is the Minotaur. I tested him in the first day, I used him in the first day, and I was very impressed actually by how strong or how useful this hero is. Because he has a lot of very nice interactions. First, he can place a bleed on his A1, which helps with boss content, which helps always with boss content. And strong hits plays actually 2 stacks of bleed, which is decent. Then, oh, and by the way, he also scales with HP once again. Decent scaling, 10%. So, once again, a hero that you just build for tankiness, and then he also deals damage. But then his core skill. On his core skill, he attacks 3 random enemies, so 3 different enemies, and every single hit has a 30% chance to place a stun. 30% is not game-changing, but it is absolutely decent, and you can increase this ability by another 20%, so 50% on a 3 times hit on 3 different enemies. So you could definitely give the Minotaur a try. Also, what I like quite a lot about him is that he can remove disables from himself, which sometimes can be useful. And then he places a Stalwart, which is fine, and a Retaliate on himself for 2 turns. And the Retaliate, in combination with this A1, is also something very cool. So in general, I think the Minotaur is definitely a hero that you could give a try, especially if you have problems with those waves, because he's good to focus on early on, because he does not only help with waves, but also with boss content. And yeah, in general, he also has an increased strong hit chance by 20% while he's at full divinity. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what to think about the passive, because most of the time you're not at full divinity. On the other hand, sometimes you actually want to keep this ultimate until you get disabled, so maybe it's actually a cool one. Didn't pay enough attention, didn't test this hero enough yet. However, you just saw how to sort for effects, so if you struggle with some waves, just go to this menu and have a look if some of your heroes bring some of those very, very valuable control effects. And yeah, I think that's it. This is pretty much the best guide, the best tip that I can give you. Just try to use some control effects, and apart from that, what helped me quite a lot is this ability. Because it attacks all enemies on an A1, which is very strong, but it is all about the attack down. If you have someone who brings attack down is so valuable, and I would say it's probably one of the 3 strongest debuffs to bring early on, probably also later on, but especially early on, attack down is so good. Attack down in combination with increased defense or some big shields are probably the 3 most valuable things that help you progress early on. So if you have someone who inflicts attack down, ideally the bigger version, but the small version is also already fine, on a reliable base, so for ideally on a basic attack, then you should definitely give this hero a try as well. But well, that's it. That's it for today's video. Thank you very much for stopping by. I really hope that this was helpful for you. And if you have any feedback, if you have any other heroes that you think people should definitely try, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by, and see you in the next one.